listening to the Medicalize This podcast. I'm Lewin.
And I'm Tremaine Ansani.
What do we see when we look up at the night sky? A black blanket thick with many lights from the stars, thousands and millions of miles away from where we stand on Earth. And yet, in that expanse of darkness, something incredible happens. The fear that the night brings begins to fade. Not because the stars themselves are so bright, but because they remind us that even in the deepest darkness, there is light. We all carry light in our lives. When the world feels heavy, when the weight of despair makes us feel lost, there is always a flicker that guides us through it all. Another name for it is hope. Hope is what keeps us moving when everything else falls apart. It gives us the strength to face what feels impossible, the courage to take one more step when we feel like we can't. Hope makes us believe there is something on the other side of the struggle, a reason to keep going. Today's guest, Dr. Frank Clark, knows this better than anyone. He has returned from the edge of oblivion, from a place so dark that finding his way back seemed impossible, but he did. And in doing so, he found a voice that now speaks not only of survival, but of the beauty in the simplest things. Reading books with his daughter, sitting with his patients, holding their hands when they are terrified, guiding them through the darkness until they too find their own light. Dr. Clark is a board-certified adult outpatient psychiatrist at Prisma Health. He is also a prolific poet and the author of 2 children's books, Positively Haiku Part 1 and Positively Haiku Part 2, both of which aim to inspire young minds and hearts through poetry and affirmations. Dr. Clark is a fierce advocate for change who uses his creative side to provide a voice and raise awareness for issues about mental health and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Before we dive into today's conversation, let's hear a poem from him. He is Dr. Frank Clark, MD.
Runner's Paradox. Strike with a gentle force to release the entangled web of ruminations. Stimulate atrophied muscles with rhythmic steps of gratitude. Shine in an ageless concrete that invites heavenly exploration. Run, run, run. Smell the refreshing aroma of soft winds gliding the human deer. Smile at faithful stars that guide creativity and store personal best. Speak to repleted lungs that require tranquility for the journey. Run, run, run. Fangs, dripping of bigotry, hasten to attack human black deer. Eyes from afar filled with gangrenous material halt the once swift glider. Hearts of infirmity congregate to infect the black dove. Bang, bang, bang.
Dr. Clark, Welcome.
Thank you, Light. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate being here.
Before we start, I want to know who are you and what is your mission in life?
I appreciate that question. As I reflect on the question, I would say that I am a man who desires to live a purpose-driven life.
Mm,
And for me, that involves my faith, that involves my family, and that involves my creativity.
mm. So, what do we need to know about the earliest years of your life in order to understand who you are today, Dr. Clark?
That's a loaded question. Let me see if I can be brief in answering. I think I would want to let my audience members know that my life has been somewhat of a pendulum
Hmm.
where I don't know if it's ever reached a steady state. There are times where the pendulum has swung towards trauma for
Hmm.
me and sorrow. And there are other times where the pendulum has swung towards freedom and catharsis.
Hmm. And can you tell us more about when that pendulum swing toward despair? What was that like for you?
So I would say growing up that I had several adverse childhood experiences. And for our listeners who may not be familiar with adverse childhood experiences, those are experiences prior to the age of 18 that a person has gone through. And that may consist of neglect or abuse. And the third component of that would be household dysfunction. For example, a person may grow up in a home with a family member who is struggling with their mental health, or they've been incarcerated, for example.
Mm-hmm.
As I reflect on my adverse childhood experiences, they would come in the form of emotional neglect.
Mm,
Growing up with a father who was partially absent, partially present, definitely has had an impact on my life, and I would say led that pendulum to swinging towards despair. But over the years, I think with any of us, it's important to acknowledge our trauma,
mhm,
to acknowledge who we are. And also, once we acknowledge who we are and are knowing that we are imperfect, how do we go about reaching a potential where we can still grow, we can still have self respect, and we can still have self compassion?
mm,
And that for me has occurred in the form of therapy. I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder prior to going to medical school. But in retrospect, I share with friends and family and close colleagues that I was probably an anxious kid and I was
mm,
probably a kid who was depressed, but I just didn't know how to classify it, how to name it.
mm. So that's the missing part on the naming because you were not aware that you had depression, just the symptoms, like, and that had an impact on you and how you experience life in medical school. So before we get, I would like to talk more about your medical journey, but first start with before medical school. What was your college experience like for you?
That's a great question. So I would say that my college experience was, it kind of felt like a roller coaster of emotions. I
Hmm.
majored in biology. and minored in chemistry at Monmouth College, which is a small liberal arts school in Illinois, and I'm very proud of my liberal arts education. While I was at Monmouth, I was able to be engaged in the athletic arena as well as the music arena. So I ran track and cross country, and I also participated in the wind ensemble, and I sang in the concert choir. So those were some of the positives in
Yeah.
my life, in addition to my academic work, and I did well academically. But I think I struggled socially. In
Mm.
fact, I wouldn't say I think I know I struggled socially in retrospect. Sometimes, actually, the further you get away from things and different steps of your life, you start to reflect back on them, and that hopefully allows for growth. But struggling socially, I think, led to me really trying to find myself and trying to belong.
Hmm.
Sometimes when you are growing up in a household of emotional neglect, it's difficult to have confidence in yourself and be your authentic self. And I finally understand that now. I did not understand that then. And so then you sometimes just try hard to make friendships and instead of just being your and embracing the person that God has made you to be.
Yeah.
I'm a different person at 43 than I was when I was 18.
Hmm. And now, what was it like to be? So, Jermaine, do you have anything to add ask Dr. Clark about what he said?
No, I just definitely can understand just like the changes or the emotional neglect and how really it's more so in retrospect when you realize how all these
Yeah.
like symptoms or things. I think what you're talking about, just like the power of labeling, the power of understanding, like I'm going through this and having that identity being like, oh, this is depression. This is what it's happening is so powerful, and it really helps you not only with like understanding more about yourself, but also just understanding that this is not necessarily uncommon. This isn't necessarily something that you experience alone, that you're not strange for like experiencing these emotions or feeling certain ways. And I definitely understand how you say that you can, a lot of these times you only experience in retrospect and that you don't necessarily know until.
I appreciate that, Tremaine, and it's good to be with you as well. Thank you for the invitation to this podcast. Um, but as I was listening to you and reflecting, I think it's easy to feel like an outsider, and I think during my college or collegiate career, I felt that way at times. I felt like an outsider. I probably wouldn't have used that word back then, but um, that's how I would describe the experience. Sometimes I was an outsider, and sometimes maybe I was an insider, but probably most of the time I felt like an outsider.
Hmm. It surprised me that when you said you were involved in a lot of activities that seemed like there were opportunities for social connection, but yet you felt like an outsider. It.
Yeah, and I guess what I can elaborate on that a little bit further. I definitely fostered friendships, but
Mm,
you can foster social connection and still feel lonely at times.
Yeah.
So I think there's different levels to friendships.
mhm,
And I think that I was searching for relationships went beyond, that went beneath the iceberg, so to speak, right? I think sometimes relationships there can be a superficial nature to them. And then you have those relationships that are more intimate and more profound,
mhm.
and you really can get to the heart of um, who people are. I
Yeah.
would say that with my teammates, I was able to build some of that. but I don't even think they knew that I really, didn't always felt like I was, I really didn't feel like I belonged at times. But again, if you're not knowing how to classify that and what to call that, again, now I call that depression and I call that anxiety. But I wasn't able to share that with them then. And now that I think about it, I don't know if I would have been comfortable sharing that with them if I had been able to put a name to what I was experiencing. Um, do I think they would have been receptive? It's possible. It's possible, but then you never know when you are vulnerable and transparent with people, especially when our frontal lobes are still developing and we're 18 and 19. I think it's a little bit different when you're in your 30s and 40s. But nonetheless, I think I still flourished in college despite that pendulum swinging back and forth.
Yeah.
I graduated magna cum laude and went on to pursue a career in medicine, which came with its own trials and tribulations. But I do believe that suffering is a gift. And I say that not because I don't think anybody likes to suffer. I definitely don't like suffering, but I characterize it as a gift because it allows you to have a perspective.
Mm.
If we don't suffer, then we're not living. And I can't remember, someone once said this, so I'm not going to take credit for this, but um, we can you can't thrive unless you've gone through suffering.
Mm. It's like
I feel like I feel like I've been able to thrive because I have suffered, and through that suffering, I have developed a growth mindset that has allowed me to thrive and allowed me to be where I am. But again, that goes back to your first question, Leigh, of what is my mission, and that's to again to live a purpose-driven life that is meaningful. But my faith in God directs all of those things and what that life looks like.
growing up, did you always know that you wanted to become a doctor?
Well, I knew I wanted to do something in the healthcare profession. If you asked some of my friends growing up, they probably would have guessed that I would have pursued a career in the arts because I grew up dancing, doing tap ballet and jazz, and I grew up playing music, and played several instruments. And I still have a love and a passion for the arts, as I know we'll talk about later. But I don't know if they would have told you that or guessed that I would have gone into medical school. Not because, I mean, I think friends growing up would have described me as pretty industrious, a pretty studious individual. But I would say probably around age 15 is when I started to really have an affinity for professions and the healthcare industry. But if I look upstream, my mother, who is a retired Chicago public school teacher, was very instrumental in making sure that I had early exposure to the healthcare profession, and that consisted of being involved in summer programs that were centered around, we call it STEM now, but I don't know what we would have called it prior to that, but science, technology, engineering, mathematics, those careers that we know are attractive for a lot of people, and they were attractive for me. So I'm thankful that my mom, she knew I had an affinity for science and was very intentional, excuse me, of making sure that I had that early exposure. And then I I toyed around with, did I want to be a chemist or did I want to be a pharmacist? And I chose to be, I wanted to pursue a career as a physician. And some of that likely stemmed from just growing up in a household where, when my father was present, I saw how his health conditions impacted his quality of life. My father is a retired minister, but he passed away when I was actually in my first year of medical school. But he had Parkinson's, and he had hypertension or high blood pressure. He probably also battled alcoholism, as I think about it. And so, growing up with a family member that is battling those illnesses can definitely impact a person, especially their prodigy. Um, and so I was fascinated by just the medications that he was taking, and just wanting him to get better. So I think there was the personal aspect, and then I think the other aspect is that I love social connection. And I have always appreciated just the art and science as it relates to the human body and all the systems that talk to one another. And it's just it's a work of art. I consider the human body poetry in a lot of ways, talking to one another and creating beautiful art and making sure all systems go. So that's how I arrived at wanting to pursue medicine. And then lastly, I would say just my shadowing experiences, volunteering experiences at my local hospital, and especially working with the elderly population, um, um, gave me another or solidified the decision to pursue medicine.
I completely agree. I feel medicine is just a beautiful amalgamation of just all these humanities, these social connections, these understanding people, creativity, but also this beautiful blend of science. And as you go through this experience, or you were going through this experience with kind of your college experience and you having these depression, anxiety, but not knowing about it, how did that translate into you being in medical school, and then also you discovering that like psychiatry is the right fit for you, or something that you want to pursue more specifically in medicine?
That's a great question. So, medical school, I think, as you all know, is an arduous journey.
Yes,
It's
That's the
a
right word.
pendulum as well.
Yeah.
I'll keep using that pendulum um, example. But I think for me, um, after graduating from college, you're on cloud nine. You're going to medical school. I got accepted into Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, which was my top choice, especially being from Chicago. And I ended up receiving a full ride scholarship to Northwestern, and so I was excited. But prior to entering medical school, I had I mentioned that I was going through depression. Depression reared its ugly head for me, and that was due to a lot of psychosocial stressors. And that led to me being hospitalized for depression and suicidal thoughts. And I really haven't shared that openly. I've been more transparent about that as of recently, actually. Many people have known that I've gone through depression or experienced depression and anxiety, but not many people have know that I've been hospitalized. One prior to medical school, and then one time during medical school. And I will admit that the reason that I have not disclosed that is because of shame and guilt. But I no longer feel ashamed, and I no longer feel guilty about that. So I am proud to share that. with people. And when I use the word proud, I feel there's a sense of freedom to share that, because I feel like we all have a story, and everybody's narrative is going to be different, but mental illness is real, and stigma is real. And so by sharing, when I say I'm proud to share that story, I hope that anyone who is listening, this may resonate with them. They may know someone who has had a similar path, but I share it just because we have to be better about being vulnerable. We are not afraid to talk about other health conditions. We're not afraid to talk about if somebody has diabetes. We're not afraid to talk about if somebody has cancer. We're not afraid to talk about if someone cholesterol is high. But we are still at times afraid to talk about mental health. And mental health is health. I don't think we should be separating physical health from mental health. So that's why I am proud and feel more free to share that story. With that being said, um, that was a dark time in my life. And when we go through those dark times, I think it's important to remember that there is a light. Sometimes that light can feel or can look kind of dim initially. But then as you walk through the wilderness, the light tends to outshine the darkness. And as I reflect back on those experiences, I believe God's light was with me, was carrying me through. Medical school was tough. Medical school is 4 years for most people. It took me 7 years, and a lot of that was due to I wasn't functioning. I wasn't functioning in the context of worsening depression, worsening anxiety, which means that kind of hard to focus and absorb um, the amount of material that is presented to you at rapid speed, especially in medical school. And I wasn't going to class, not because I didn't want to, but depression will do that to you, where you don't have the motivation and energy and the get up and go. And so I suffered, um, and that led to me not passing my first year. But I remained resilient and came back and passed my first year. But then, I had another bump in the road. I feel like I'll call them boulders, or I used to call them Goliaths. I just think about the story of David and Goliath, and I had to use a lot of slingshots to get to the promised land, so to speak. But when you are seeing your peers move on, that is depressing, or that was depressing. And then again, just kind of going back to kind of feeling like an outsider throughout my life and not really fitting in, right? Those thoughts, you start to ruminate on those things, and your past can kind of hunt you, so to speak, or your trauma. So I did not pass my first step one of my boards. So you have to take step one and step two of your United States medical licensing exam in order to graduate from medical school. So did not pass on the first attempt. Took a board prep course in Kansas City, and I'm still indebted to that program to this day because they helped modify my study habits. I'm also indebted to Dr. Sandra LeBlanc, who was my academic supervisor. And so I just want to give her a shout out because she believed in me, and she told me that I didn't have a test taking problem. I just needed to modify my study habits and believe in myself more, and she was right. So thank you to Dr. LeBlanc. Thank you, Dr. LeBlanc, for always believing in me. And then I had to get over one more boulder, and that was my surgery rotation in my third year of my clerkships, and didn't pass that not once but twice, and then finally passed that and passed step two on the first try, and I was able to walk across the stage. I took a bow and celebrated, and I haven't looked back since.
Did you celebrate with your mom? Was your mom there with you?
She was. My mom, I haven't really seen my mom cry much, even as a child. She
Mhm.
told me she cried when I graduated from high school, and I think she wept
Mm,
um, when I graduated from medical school because she was there with me through the struggle,
yeah,
and losing my father, um, grappling with unresolved trauma, you name it. It was a journey.
yeah,
But I had people along the way. One of my best friends, Dr. Joe Martinez. We did medical school together. He was very instrumental in helping me, get through the struggles. Like I said, my academic advisors, the deans. Um, so I had a village. My mother, my church at the time, Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago. So there was I had a lot of I had a supporting cast,
yeah.
and that is key. And no matter what you decide to do in life, you have to have um, a support system.
Hmm.
And so, um, yeah, we celebrated and had a big graduation party.
Yep.
And because along the way, you meet people who are not in medicine. And through my journey through medical school, I developed some strong relationships that those relationships continue to thrive. People I've been friends with now for over 13 years or more. And I also want to thank them for helping me navigate the journey because, again, you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I certainly cannot. I'm going through a very stressful time of my life being a college student right now, and I cannot do it without the friends, the people who surround me and give me a lot of love and care and support. So I resonated with that statement a lot, and I also so going back to your point about going through medical school with so many things that seem to go against you, and yet you still were able to find a dim light in your life to get you through it all. How what was that like? What was like? Um, was it poetry? Was it the arts? Or how did you cope with depression during that time?
Yes.
I appreciate that question. So, social connection was key.
Mm,
Mhm.
Again, going back to depression, for some people, when they're depressed, they could easily isolate. So for me, I would frequent my favorite tea shop at the time, which was Argo Tea,
Okay.
and met a lot of people, made a lot of friends. Again, friends that I've been friends with over a decade now.
mhm,
Just from those relationships. So they were part of that dim light. Um, so I guess I kind of look at it like there was a lamp there,
mm,
and it needed a certain wattage, in terms of the bulbs, but it wasn't just one bulb. So there was the bulb of social connection. There was the bulb of faith, my faith community, my church community, and then there was the bulb of poetry. And poetry, I used to write a little bit in college, but I wouldn't even say that I was necessarily writing poetry at the time. Um, I would just write, maybe just journaling, just writing down thoughts, and maybe it was poetry at the time. I just didn't think about it as poetry. But as I would sit at the tea shop, I started to reflect more. And when you see a psychiatrist in medical school, as I have, um, there's medicines are one piece of the puzzle, but if you're really going to make strides in your journey towards growth, medicines can only do so much. And you have to take time to sit and to be with your feelings. Doesn't mean you have to judge your feelings and your thoughts, but you do want to acknowledge them. Okay. And so poetry is a good way to just let your pen do the talking.
Mm.
And I had a lot to write about because I wanted to explore myself. Um, when I was in high school, I didn't know who I was. I knew what people thought I was or who they told me I was. In college, I didn't know who I was. There was definitely a identity crisis. Um, I would even argue in medical school, I didn't know really who I was, except that I was a individual that was depressed and anxious, and um, I was a busy individual as a child that really didn't take time to reflect on how I was really feeling.
Mm.
So I think poetry allowed me to be very intentional about discovering, who is Frank, not what people, not letting people define me and society define me, but defining myself. And I think that we struggle with that as individuals. It's easy to get wrapped up in who society thinks you should be, who society thinks you are. But we have to be mindful of embracing ourself. We all have baggage, right? I think if all of us went to the airport right now and they said, okay, put your baggage and on the on the scale, we might be over the limit because all of us have things in our life that have impacted us. But how do you lighten that baggage?
Yeah.
You got to do your own work. You got to do your own therapy.
Mhm.
So I decided to lighten the load for myself by writing poetry. And that's how the book The Other Side came to fruition. And I was intentional about that title because the other side is what people didn't know about me, maybe what I didn't know about myself. Okay. So that collection of poems is a collection of navigating the trials and tribulations of my life, but also talking about the themes of friendship, faith, family. And it was freeing to write. I wasn't planning on publishing it, but my social support encouraged me to be vulnerable and share it with people. And I think it's a collection of maybe 40 poems. And it's been that was 10 years ago, actually 10 years ago that I published it. So it's interesting that we're talking about this today. I can't remember the exact date. It may have been September, actually. I'll have to take a look at that, but it was definitely 10 years ago. 10 years ago that I self-published it. So yes, there's something to be sitting down when you're sipping tea and you're just reflecting and you're writing.
I think you raised a lot, or no, you raised a lot of great points, actually. I actually have The Other Side, and I was reading it. You published it on October 4th, but like you said, I think you did such a beautiful job of kind of, like you said, showing the different pendulums of this like person who's very like romantic, who can kind of be, I guess, idealized as a doctor, but also a lot of the trials and tribulations of your life. And you raised a great point about how this was over a decade ago, and this was definitely a very different part of your life. How do you feel that you're like writing your use of poetry has changed from back 10 years ago when you were writing this other side and really navigating your identity to now as a full-blown doctor, a family man, and society changing?
Well, first, thank you for purchasing the book. I didn't know that you all had purchased a book, and so I appreciate that support. I think just trying to be mindful of how I answer this question. That book, The Other Side, will always be near and dear to my heart
Hmm.
because it was my first collection of poems, and I've had friends ask if I will do another collection one day, and the answer is yes. Right now, I've probably been more focused on children's books, although I still do write other forms of poetry. But I think my writing skills have improved from 10 years ago. Um, but not to necessarily, you don't necessarily want to judge your writing because your writing is for you. And yes, I'm sharing that with a wider audience, but what I wrote in The Other Side is what I felt
Hmm.
at the time. And I would say when I write now, I still write about trauma. I still write about, even though my symptoms of depression have been in remission now for many years, anxiety still wreaks havoc on me. Um, Sometimes daily, sometimes every couple months. It just depends. But I've gone through burnout in my life, and I have allowed medicine to be my mistress at times. And
Hmm.
so I reflect on that. I write on that. I write on what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband, what it means to navigate all those roles as a father, husband, physician, friend, um, caregiver for my mother who has dementia, what it means to continue to grow. We never stop growing. So, I'm 43. I'm still working on self-compassion for myself. That is something that my therapist and I continue to work on. And, believe it or not, I think I'm always better about being compassionate towards my patients and my friends and family than myself. And so I am that has been something that I've also been writing about. So my poetry, it ebbs and flows. Um,
Hmm.
I will say that a lot of my poetry, no matter what I'm writing about, even if it's some of the darkest moments in my life or what's going on in the world, as it relates to the polarization of America, or just the world in general, political tension, racial tension, you name it. Um, I always try to end with hope. So if you read any of my poetry, it may start off dark, but it will always 99.9% of the 99% of the time it will end with hope because I still believe in humanity. I believe in common humanity that we all share a sense of love. And so I try to reflect that in my poetry. And I think poetry, the last thing I'll say about that is that poetry has been life-saving for me.
Mm.
It
No,
it has allowed me to thrive. It's allowed me to survive, and it has allowed me to bare myself naked on stage.
I
And
agree.
and when you can do that, then I think that that is living for me. Being able to be free, be authentic, and and be introspective.
I completely agree. I think just poetry, like you said, can be such a beautiful outlet to be introspective, to be reflective, but also to, like you said, show that self compassion, show that hope. And I think that's something that you've done very brilliantly. I know that you're an adult psychiatrist, but despite being an adult psychiatrist, you've written multiple children's books, one Positive Haiku, part one and part two, which you encourage to kind of let children hope and be happy and have these self-compassion, self-growth. And also you recently released a book, Power to Act, where you state no matter who you are, you have the power to act. Um, can you share a little bit more about those books, the journey, and kind of you writing them?
Absolutely. So, if I had to reflect on if I think about what I'm most proud of in my life, um, being married to my wife Jennifer, being a father to my daughter Claire, um, I would put graduating from medical school up there, but I would probably say a close third would be writing children's books.
Hmm.
And the reason that I say that is that all of the children's books, I actually have a fourth one coming out the week of
Cool.
Thanksgiving called Anticipating Growth. And all the children's books that I write are dedicated to Claire and inspired. She inspires me to be my best self. And kids have a way of really challenging you to reflect. And the first two books, Positively Haiku, Part One and Part Two, the genesis of those books it was twofold. While I am not a child and adolescent psychiatrist, I, as a father, um, and a psychiatrist who does see children and adolescents when they come to the emergency department due to a psychological crisis or distress. Um, we know the power of positive affirmations. They boost confidence. They make us feel good about ourselves. Um, they can improve our overall just well-being. And I believe that children need all the confidence in the world, but not just children, all ages. And I think if we think about it, even adults, we're kind of just big kids at heart. I don't think we ever stop being children. Yes, we
Yeah.
have to pay bills as we get older and, attend to, responsibilities that kids don't have. But at the heart of every adult is a big kid that loves to play, that loves to explore, that loves to be creative. And so when I was writing these books, I wanted kids to get early exposure to haiku, short form of poetry, 3 lines, 17 syllables, easy to recite. And why not put them in the form of positive affirmations? So, but the second part of that reasons for writing those books, excuse me, is that, and this is probably in retrospect, I share with people I wish that I had books like that when I was growing up.
Mm.
I am sure maybe other people um, would have benefited from books with positive affirmations. And so I was likely channeling my inner child when writing those books. And probably any children's book that I do, I am channeling my inner Frank, or the inner child, the Frank of 5 years old or above. So um, each book is illustrated, and um, been blessed to work with a talented illustrator, Daria Ponomarico, who is based in Poland. She is from Ukraine, and so such a great international collaboration. And the books also come with music. So, I think these books really speak to the importance of the social emotional learning framework that we all know is important as kids are developing into themselves and who they want to be. And so I also want to thank Nan Avant, who is an award-winning composer based in Seattle, Washington, for doing the compositions for the books, and they come with a QR code that you can scan and takes you to Nan's website so you can hear the music that accompanies the books. So um, I've been very thankful and very blessed that the books have gotten a lot of exposure globally, but especially in the state of South Carolina, and being able to go into schools, also doing author events at bookstores, and just finding other ways to share positivity in the world. Because I think at the end of the day, no matter how dark things seem to be, there is a light. And again, I believe poetry can be that light.
I think that's the message that I got from two of your books, the Positively Haikus. Um, so I want to thank you for writing those beautiful poems, and I think they will go on to impact a lot of people, including adults and children. Um, did Claire read those books that you wrote?
Yes, well, first, thank you for that feedback, and I appreciate you all reading them. That means a lot. So, I think one of the biggest things is of being an author is you're just happy when your books are in the hands of people of various backgrounds, various ages, um, and that people really, especially as adults, it's cool to hear you all say that you enjoyed the books. I think kids, it's one thing, but when we have adults that are giving that positive feedback, that I appreciate that. Claire and I have read the books together, and she, she's in the book, so she's already excited about that, and so no, she enjoys the books. My hope and prayer is that as she gets older, she's 5 right now. So as she gets older, that she will appreciate the books more. I think at this age, she loves the illustrations, and we go over some of the words and what they mean. But I believe children's books live in perpetuity, and whenever I transition from this earth, um, that those are books that she will always have,
Yeah.
and I hope that she will reflect fondly on them, and even as she continues to mature into an adult, that she will maybe at times go back to those books. I I have them in my office, and sometimes when I have some downtime, or especially when I'm stressed or having a rough day, I will open them, and I will read them out loud to myself, and that can be very therapeutic.
Well, speaking of the therapeutic effect of the art, I also think art can be a good outlet for yourself, your creative side, and it actually reminds me of a poetry reading that I went to 2 weeks ago, and it featured the U.S. poet laureate Ada Limon, and at that reading there was a question about, because she was writing a poem that will be engraved on the side of the Europa spaceship that NASA will launch into the outer space to go to Jupiter. And the question that she got was, why would the scientists always reach out to artists, musicians, poets, writers, authors to, represent humanities? And the answer that she gave was because the arts is the most human thing that you can think of. Not the science, not the technology, but the arts, the poems, the text that was made by human hands. And so I appreciate a lot of what you are doing using art to inspire people. Yeah.
Just gonna add, going on that too, it's just something beautiful that I think is really unique and beautiful about your books is the music that accompanies it. And also just I've heard also some other YouTube videos with your poem being being spoken along with and performed along with like the South Carolina Philharmonics and the Wild Beautiful Orchestra. It just very something that, like you said, is therapeutic. It adds a new perspective and just shows that huge humanistic connection. I found it very just mesmerizing. And
No, I appreciate both of those comments, and I would agree with the poet laureate. Um, uh, you know, it. I think we always have to be mindful of what connects us,
Mm-hmm.
and we may, you can speak a different language, you can come from a different socioeconomic status, you may have a different ethnic background, different racial background, gender, geographical diversity, what have you, gender, um, sex, what have you. Art, no matter where we come from, our background, art is one of the biggest connectors.
Yeah.
Right? It's a language that everyone can speak. And so, and that's where I think music comes along, right? You can hear the same song in a different language, and even if you don't understand the language, you know the song,
Yeah.
right? And how beautiful is it when people are singing together, whether it be in a different language or not, right? You still recognize the song, and the song still has meaning. And I think that's, for me, where poetry is the great connector. I've been very blessed to collaborate with composers globally
Mm-hmm.
who have set my poetry to music, and I've been blessed to work with amazing vocalists and artists over the past several years. And I don't take that lightly because I think that it's a gift to be creative. It's a gift to collaborate. And through these collaborations, have um, have developed fruitful friendships. And I would also say that when you're collaborating with people who do this for a living and who are in the arts, I think it's important to have a diverse group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am thankful for the collaborations just because of the fruitful friendships, but also sometimes it's good to get outside of medicine. Not sometimes, I think most of the time. I think we have to have our outlets. And so learning a different language, so to speak, when you're talking to composers and vocalists and understanding what they're thinking when they're singing your words or composing, and looking at the instrumentation. And again, I have a little bit of a music background, so I understand a little bit, but I have learned so much from them, and hopefully we've learned from each other. But I am I'm hopeful for many more collaborations. Well, actually, those are continuing, and
Mm-hmm.
there'll be some new things coming out, hopefully. But it's um, it's a dream come true. I will never stop writing. I will never stop collaborating. Um, I love being a physician. I love being a psychiatrist, and but at the end of the day, um, I refer to myself as a psychiatrist poet.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I do that is because I, my identity used to be wrapped up in um, medicine. And maybe other people can relate, whether you're in medicine or other fields, but it's so easy to just be defined by what we do.
You're right. Yeah.
And I have, it's been difficult, still a work in progress. You know, I have to be very mindful when people ask me, so who are you? What do you do? It's easy to have that knee-jerk reaction, that knee-jerk answer of, oh, I'm a psychiatrist, I'm a physician. That's that's not to say that that's not true, but I've tried to reframe that and say, I am um think about myself true. So I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a friend. I just happen to be a psychiatrist,
Yeah.
but I'm a creator.
Yeah.
And and for me that adds more meaning to me when I can think about it that way. So I try to just think about that, and again, that's not to say I'm not proud of that I'm not proud of being a physician. I am definitely proud to be a physician, but we are not one dimensional. We are multidimensional in what we in how we think about our lives. And I think what I would want to encourage our listeners is that your occupation does not define you. That would be probably the take home point of that message is that we are not defined by our occupation, nor should we define ourselves by our occupation, because again, um, we didn't come out of our mother's womb, um, and said, "Oh, this is our occupation," in terms of what we're going to do, right? We came out and we we were then free to explore, right? Free to play, free to be creative. And so I don't want people to lose that creativity because it is still in us and it will be with us until the day that we die. So we need to be more intentional about being creative, and we need to be more intentional about cultivating the arts anytime we have the opportunity.
Having the freedom to do whatever we like, or striving to do whatever we like, and being, breaking the social expectations to be ourselves. It feels like it goes back to your point about nurturing that inner child to be, because even though we are adults, we are still carrying that child within ourselves. And so I also think it's important to nurture that and let it define our life rather than, letting society define who we are. So on that note, um, I would like, well, maybe we can end this interview with a question that is oriented towards the future. So you talked about you are working on publishing a book um, in this year, Thanksgiving, right? So besides that, do you have any other projects that you're currently working on or want to work on in the future?
Yes. Um, well, first, thank you again, Lay and Tremaine, for the opportunity to fellowship with you all and break some bread and
Mhm.
have a fruitful discussion. I greatly appreciate it. So, yes, there are definitely several projects. I guess I'm always working on things. My wife would probably tell you she'd probably like me to slow down in some things, but no, she's one of my biggest supporters and always wants me to
Mhm.
embrace my
Mhm.
creativity.
Mhm.
I will have a fifth children's book coming out. I don't know when. This one, I promised Claire that we would do a book together, and so she told me what the theme she wanted, the theme of the book, and so I've written the book. We just have to get it illustrated and put the music. So her name will be on the book, and I'm excited for her because this is something that she can call her own and something that she will always have as well. So that is a promise that I made to her, and I, I, so I'm excited to see that come to fruition. I continue to collaborate with composers. There will be the world premiere of some of my latest poems that have been set to music. There's a upcoming performance November 21st at the Seagull Museum in Greenville, South Carolina, where I was blessed to do a collaboration with a composer named John Greer, as well as Maria Corley. Maria Corley is based in Pennsylvania, and John Greer is based in South Carolina. And so they've set several of my poems to music, which will be performed by a phenomenal tenor and a good friend of mine, Dr. Johnny Felder. And so that is one project, or something that's coming soon, upcoming. And then I I will probably at some point do another collection of poems. For um, I've been asked. A lot of my friends have been asking me that over the past year or two, and I have enough for a book. They've been published through Psychiatric Times, which is a psych magazine journal that has a global audience, and so I'm thankful to the editors, Heidi Andur and Leah Kuntz, for publishing my work. But I will probably put those all, or the majority of them, into another book because it's probably time. It's been 10 years, so it's probably time for a second collection. So I will be working on that, and I will probably be very intentional about which ones I will select for that book, but that will probably happen at some point.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Clark, for gracing us with your presence today. We were definitely floored by your humility, your passion, your enthusiasms, and your willingness to share your story. I, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Yes, I completely second everything Blaze says, and I eagerly anticipate your future poems, creations, art, everything.
Well, thank you, Leigh and Tremaine. Just all the things that you're doing in the world, especially with this podcast, and I encourage you all just to continue spreading joy, spreading positivity, and creativity. And this, that's part of creativity is what you all are doing. So kudos to you. Again, thank you for the invitation, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. This episode of Medicalize This was produced by me, Lê Nguyen, and Jermaine Ansani. Special thanks to Kayla Wong, our editor-in-chief, for giving this episode the best shape possible. Our original theme music and additional music come from Blue Dot Sessions. If you enjoy the show, please help others find us by telling your friends about us, posting our episodes on social media, or leaving us a review and rating on your favorite podcast app. I'm your host, Lê. See you next time.